Okay, today we are starting to dive deep into the hidden power of the fixed stars, astrology. In addition to 7 planets, a number of fixed stars also poses really great powerful influences in this field. The stars we see at night in the framework of well-known constellations are only a very small fraction of the hundreds of billions of stars in Milky Way galaxy. Whenever I see this beautiful Milky Way circle, it reminds me of the story of the polymaths Sultan Amali, who was probably the best traditional astronomer of our century. He had said, during my youth I spent a few summer days living as a solitary stranger in a mountains village. The elder and sage of that village was an ancient, very tall old man, who was the eminent elder and the wise man of that village. My routine was such that when a portion of the night had passed and all had fallen into slumber, I would secretly emerge from my lodging, shielded from the eyes of the folk, engage myself in beholding the heavens and stars. Until one night, during the course of my vigil, I discovered that old man devotes himself to spiritual disciplines and asceticism by night. Because on an encounter, a brief discourse of questioning and cross-questioning began that night. Eventually, he inquired of me, "What is this white line upon the heavens?" I replied, "From the multitude of stars clustering close together and mingling of their radiance, such sweet and captivating lines has appeared upon the sky, which we mark the Milky Way, the galaxy." Upon hearing this response, he shook his head back and forth several times and said, "That which you speak is a discourse exceedingly feeble, and from its very roots unstable and incorrect." I said, "O elder, since you are aware of its truth and possess knowledge thereof, how pleasant it would be if, in this heart of the night, I might learn it from you, imprint it upon my heart, and keep it as a keepsake for the ages, and remain grateful to you." After a brief pause, that old sage said, "When Abraham, the prophet, by the command of his beloved Lord, intended to sacrifice his son, the moment he laid him upon the earth to place the knife to his throat, the merciful Lord commanded Gabriel to swiftly bring a ram from the paradise to Abraham, and to request of him to slaughter this ram in place of his son. When Gabriel sought to bring the ram down from the heaven to earth, that mute beast showed great rebelliousness and agitation as a consequence of that restlessness. Its horn scraped harshly against the heavens, and thus this scratch appeared upon the visage of the sky." Okay. Some towards this temperature. Okay. In fact, Iranian and Muslim astronomers, including Abu Mashar, in his book Kitab Madkhal Kabir, or The Great Introduction, adopted the classification of stellar magnitudes that Ptolemy had presented. As you can see here, the number of stars in each class. Ptolemy also mentioned 5 nebulae in Almagest or Majesty, which consist of Sahabi Masam Saraya or brightest Nebula, Sahabi Rasul Jabbar or Mesa, Sahabi Ma'laf or Beehive Cluster, as you also known as Precip, Sahabi Talia Shole, which in modern astronomy they label it as BS 6630 and Sahabi Ain al-Rami موسیقی. Finally, Ptolemy identified 9 stars as faint or obscure stars. Ptolemy accommodated all 122 stars that he included in his catalogue within the framework of the 48 traditional constellations. However, Abdurrahman al-Sufi realized that after 100 years, this calculation had suffered from gross errors. So, by reobserving, he updated the celestial longitude coordinates of all 122 stars in the Almagest by adding exactly 12 degrees and 42 minutes, which was based on the precision rate of that calculated by astronomers of the Mamun era. In fact, Ptolemy's star catalogue comprised 3 categories of stars: stars within the constellations, which the majority of stars, more than 900 stars, were located within the boundaries of the 48 well-known constellations of that era. But they certainly became part of Although they certainly became part of the 12 zodiac signs, and the longitude of all the stars must be stated relative to 0 point of Aries and positioned within one of the zodiac signs. Also, stars around the constellations, which they were certain stars, were mentioned as stars that are distinct or around the constellations. For example, outside of the constellations of Orion. These stars didn't belong to a specific pattern, but they were used to define the boundaries and limit of that constellations. And uninformed stars, which they were a small number of stars which didn't officially belong to any constellations or group. Sufi's innovative contributions to recording new stars was as follows. First, discovery of unformed stars. Sufi observed dozens of new stars around the constellations that Ptolemy had completely overlooked. In the text of his book, he precisely described these as stars not mentioned by Ptolemy and corrected their position. Discovery of non-stellar objects, nebulae and galaxies. He discovered and recorded the Andromeda galaxy, the famous Andromeda galaxy, as the Datatus Sahabiyah, and large Magellanic Cloud, which we know as the White Ox, and he himself mentioned it as Al-Baqar al-Abyaz, or Qav Safid in Persian, and also the Small Magellanic Cloud, or Qanam. Other thing that Sufi had done was rectifying the errors that Ptolemy had done in his work. In fact, Sufi kept the total count of Ptolemy's official 122 stars catalog locked to maintain scientific integrity and prevent confusion for future astronomers. However, in both text and illustrations of the Book of the Fixed Stars, Suwar al-Kawakib, he observed, discovered, and recorded for the first time in astronomical history many new stars, an object that Ptolemy had never seen. About the Andromeda galaxy, Sufi is the first person in history to observe this galaxy, naming it a nebulous spot. He called it Datatus Sahabiyah in Constellations Andromeda. Constellations Andromeda in Persian is Zan bar Zanjir, or in Arabic they call it Imra'atul Musalsala, which is near the constellation Pisces. As you know, Andromeda galaxy is located 2.5 million light years away, and therefore with current technology it is absolutely impossible to travel there and explore its stars. Sufi clearly recorded these nebulous objects. And contrary to their names, the Small Magellanic Cloud and its larger counterpart, the Large Magellanic Cloud, are not ordinary nebulae or clouds of gas and dust. Rather, they are small dwarf satellite galaxies orbiting a Milky Way. Hundreds of years before Magellan, Abdurrahman Al-Sufi referenced them in his book of Fixed Stars. It's better to know that these objects was not visible from northern Iran, but Sufi recorded it based on the reports of the Arab observers in south of Arabian Peninsula or Yemen. Although due to the latitude of Alexandria in Egypt, Ptolemy had never been able to see this southern sky object. Among the compilations authored by astrologers, there is no comprehensive explanation regarding how the great fixed stars exert their influences, and it has only been mentioned briefly in some astrological books. Fixed stars can influence the planets, lots, or Arabic parts, and specific degrees of the zodiac, including the MC and AS, the four angels. Generally, the nature and temperament of each star is considered a blend of temperaments of two planets. In classifying the nature of fixed stars, astrologers often consider stars located within the same constellations to share the same nature. For instance, fixed stars such as Al-Ghul or Ras al-Ghul, Mirfaq al-Suraya or Mifak, and the Nebula Mesam al-Suraya, which are located in the constellations Perseus, are all considered to have the nature of Mars and Mercury. Or fixed stars like Rigel or Rejul al-Jawza, Betelgeuse, or Mankab al-Ayman min al-Jawza, or Bellatrix, Mankab al-Aysar min al-Jawza, which are located in the constellation of Orion or Jabbar in Arabic or Shekarchi Farsi in Persian, are all considered to have the nature of Saturn and Jupiter. Another term used regarding the fixed stars is the concept of them being destructive or malefic, or qate, qabate in Persian, and benefic or zaed in Arabic and Persian. Destructive stars or qawate are actually those that possess a malefic temperament and have a negative influences, while increasing stars or zaed possess a benefic temperament and positive effects. Qawate and zawaid are mostly used in the subject of primary directions, or tasirat, a very important technique in Persian astrology, meaning that whenever the direction of the ascendant degree, or the hilaj, or kat khoda, or one of the luminaries, or nagirain in Persian, reaches a fixed star that is destructive or qate, and bad events occurs. Unlike the seven planets, no specific body or magnetic orb radius is considered for the great fixed stars, and most astrologers consider an orb of less than 1 degree for all fixed stars. Regarding the timing of the fixed star influences, two conditions exist. The first condition is, which is considered one of the primary states, is when the fixed star in question is conjunct with one of the primary significators of the natal chart, namely, for example, the ascendant angle, the midheaven, or other angels. The port of fortune or Sahm al-Sa'ada in Arabic and Persian, one of the luminaries, or the lord or ruler of the ascendant. And the second condition, which is considered a secondary or revolutionary or perfectional state, is when a fixed star is not conjunct with the primary significators in the natal chart, but rather the direction of one of the primary significators reaches these fixed stars in a specific year of the native's life. Okay, I think it is enough for this session, and let's continue for the next